So, now that we're winding things down, I wanted to do what I've always promised that I would, or at least said that I wanted to do, and get some of the Patreon exclusive videos out into the general population. It's not like I think they were ever being watched at all over on Patreon. At least I never had a single comment on any of them. But now that I've shut down my Patreon completely, I'm going to just be repurposing them, 10 at a time, into supercuts. I can't guarantee that they're all going to show up here, but I'm going to try, at least for the majority. These are all going to be in their original form as my patrons actually saw them. So let's get started. Do you ever get tired of watching apologists fail? No, neither do I, although I wish they do something new once in a while, something I'm really not holding my breath on, and you probably shouldn't be either, because these people are all idiots. So, with that in mind, here comes another one. This short comes from a channel called Alive for Christ, although really it's just a snippet of a Cliff Connectal rant, and ultimately it just makes Cliff look dumb, which I think, as we already know, he is. No surprise there. Yet it's touting this as evidence for God's existence, and that is not remotely true. It's just claims borne out by nothing but wishful thinking, because Cliff, and the channel apparently, just really wants it to be true. So what? So let's watch Cliff make a fool of himself once again, because that never gets old, does it?
If I prepare a delicious meal, set it before you, and tell you there's no cook, you'd laugh in my face.
Nope. If you bring me a bowl of fruit and I like fruit, then there's a meal and no cook involved. There's all kinds of food that I can take straight off a tree or out of the ground and eat it with little or no preparation. Are we really thinking that Cliff doesn't understand that? Or is he just assuming that people listening to him are going to think that something else is going on? Because that happens in a lot of apologetics. They make assumptions and then the people listening laugh in their face. Cliff, he gets laughed at a lot, doesn't he? Wonder why?
If I took you to Mount Rushmore and said, hey, isn't it incredible the way the water just trickled down the side of the mountain? Hey, wow, there's George.
In that case, we know that the carvings were made by people. We know that Gusten Borglum was the chief sculptor and architect of Mount Rushmore. So he's taking a specific example with a known and demonstrable creator, and I'm sure he's just moving the goalposts and pretending that means that all things had a creator. Bullshit. Cliff is an idiot. We can find all kinds of entirely natural carvings out there that had no demonstrable creator. I've done that many times on the channel, showed natural things doing natural things that man interpreted as art, or producing patterns that man imagined had some meaning, but it isn't. It doesn't. It's just something that nature does, and since we're a part of nature, we see things in it that aren't really there. We're really good at that. That's part of the human makeup. Like I said, Cliff is an idiot.
Isn't that Jefferson? Wow, there's Roosevelt up there.
Wow, there's an idiot on screen. No, not that guy, although honestly, who knows? More likely, those two are just laughing at Cliff's insanity. This isn't a very good video to see it in, but for a lot of these park preachers or campus preaching morons, they will put up videos with everyone around them gathering to make fun of them. Nobody takes them seriously. They are just a joke, but they thrive on it because their silly book tells them that they're going to be hated, and this is the proof that they drag back to their congregations or their followers and say, see, we were right all along. No, the actual fact is, they are hated, but only because they're such imbeciles. And that's not really something to be proud of.
And isn't that Abraham Lincoln? Wow, isn't that incredible the way the water just sort of carved out those heads?
Isn't it incredible just how completely dishonest this lunatic is, because it takes a tenuous grasp on both reality and honesty to do what he's doing, and maybe he's been doing it for so long that he doesn't even know he's doing it anymore. But picking something demonstrably created and then just asserting that because one thing was created, therefore all things are created, and let's be honest, we know that's what's coming up next, that is blatantly dishonest. But, consider the source, right?
You'd be outraged. Order and design point us to an intelligent mind.
But only if there actually is order and design. What you interpret as design, what you want to be design, what you claim as design, that isn't necessarily design, especially if you've got religious mind poison coursing through your veins, telling you a bunch of unjustifiable nonsense because you really want to believe it. Mount Rushmore doesn't prove that the universe is designed. That's an assertion, not an established, well-evidenced fact. This is not evidence for God's existence, as it says at the top of the screen. This is evidence that these people are idiots. Now, I've said this many times before, and I think this warrants a repeat. The only way to provide evidence for God is to provide evidence for God. Directly, demonstrably, verifiably for God. The only way to rationally claim that God has ever done anything is to prove that God exists first. Directly, evidentially, verifiably. Then you can provide evidence for a direct causal link between this God that you've already proven is real and the event in question. The only way to rationally get there, and the religious aren't even trying to do this, is to back it up with evidence. But they don't care. They just want to believe.
Now, when I use that argument, I'm not saying science proves God's existence.
You're not mentioning science at all. Granted, this is a sped up snippet, so we don't know what's been said in context, but the religious will try this all the time, won't they? They will throw out science for credibility while ignoring actual science entirely. Science will look at his claims and laugh in his face. What he's saying has nothing at all to do with science. It has to do with his own credulity, and that's nothing to be proud of. I hate having to keep saying that, but it's true.
Rather, I'm trying to use common sense to say, come on, fellas, you guys know that order and design do not come about by chance.
And you still haven't demonstrated that there is any verifiable order or design there. This is just, but it seems to me, based on the religion that he's embraced because he really wants it to be true. So what? This is why you can't let these people waltz around with the goalposts. Put up or shut up. Don't tell us what you interpret as design. Show us that it actually is. What are the demonstrable hallmarks of design, and how can you show that those are present in whatever it is that you're talking about? But I want it to be true. That doesn't mean anything. Stop making a fool of yourself. You've already done that enough.
Order and design point to an intelligent mind.
Repeating the same nonsense over and over again, that doesn't make it any more true. This is something that you'll notice a lot of theists will do, though. They just repeat the same thing over and over because they know it makes it stick in the mind of the lunatics that are watching along. It doesn't change the truth value any, but they're not interested in truth. They care about converts and the inevitable money that comes along with them. That's what they're actually after, remember? Money. Money, power, and control. They don't care about the truth. Never have, never will. So nothing Cliff has said here was at all impressive, which I guess is hardly a surprise, because Cliff isn't impressive. He's just another religious con man and idiot looking to score some cred and hopefully some money off the backs of the religiously gullible. It almost never works, but he's got excuses for why he fails so often. All of them do. Well, it's not me, it's God. It's all in God's hands now. I don't have to worry about failing because it was never on me to begin with. No, you're just an idiot. You are a failure. What else is new? I mean, what else indeed? But this is exactly how these people work, And this is exactly why these people fail, because these people are morons. And Cliff Connectal, he's one of the worst. Why do the religious keep failing? I talk about that a lot on the channel because it is obvious that they all do. They preach to the choir and then they just make excuses when everybody else just laughs because they couldn't care less about the truth. They just want to stroke their childish egos, and we're going to look at some more of that coming up next. We're going back to look at Cliff Connectal again, not because I think he's worth a damn, because he's not, but because he's painfully easy to show that he doesn't know a damn thing, and he doesn't care. It's pure fifis and faith, and his ignorance is ridiculously clear. What else is new? This is how the religious operate, pandering to the faithful and pretending that any of the drivel that falls from their lips must mean a thing. But it doesn't. It just doesn't. It's just painfully stupid, especially for anyone who's ever seen their dog and pony show before. So let's get to it.
Take 10 pennies. Number them 1 to 10. Drop them into your right pocket.
Oh, good. I can already see where this is going to go. It's an incredibly common and incredibly stupid example that the religious use for design, but it just doesn't work, does it? So let me tell you what I think he's probably going to do, and we'll have to see if I'm right. The religious think that the odds of some combination of those pennies is actually meaningful, but statistically, any combination that you might pull out of your pocket has the exact same likelihood of occurring. Just because you assume significance, that doesn't mean that significance exists. If it came out 1 through 10, that has the exact same statistical chances as if it came out 10 through 1, or evens and then odds, or any other combination for that matter. 5, 2, 4, 9, 6, 1, 7, 8, 3, 10 is just as likely as 1 through 10 in that order. You can do that with cards too, because I see a lot of them using cards in their example, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So let's see where he goes with this, because I'm predicting right now it's not going to be anywhere intelligent.
Now, pull them out sequentially. I'm not going to stand around holding my breath for you to pull that off.
What does that even mean in this context? You don't think the other person can get them out of their pocket? I mean, by all means, hold your breath until I'm done. I might just forget about it and go do something else in the middle, because I think Cliff is a complete douchebag. Watching him flop around on the ground while he's holding his breath, that might be fun. But anyhow, let's get back to the video, because I think he means something else. Still, it is a nice thought though, isn't it?
Now, if you can't do that, simple thing.
Whoa, wait. That's what he actually meant? He doesn't think that people can pull them out of their pocket at all. Oh, I know he meant in a preordained order, but that's not what he said, is it? Any order that I pull them out is sequentially, right? Because it can mean one after the other, and that's exactly what I'm doing. All right, let's stop holding words against Cliff because we know he's not all that bright. Go ahead and make your point, which I already took apart at the beginning. This is not going to get him anywhere intelligent, but I don't think we can really expect that, can we?
How do you expect me to believe that the complex eye, central nervous system, is a cosmic accident?
It isn't. This is just Cliff being a moron because he doesn't understand how natural selection works. It's not an accident. It's not designed, but it is a series of trial and error steps where the ones that work most effectively and efficiently, they make it through and reproduce more often, and the ones that don't, they stop being passed on to the next generation. That's the reality of it, but Cliff and his fellow mental midgets, they can't understand that. Instead, they want to believe that there was a plan. Everything that we see around us is how it was supposed to be. Therefore, there had to be a predetermined sequence that all of the steps had to go through to get where it was predestined to go. Which is why they play the card trick and the coin trick, because they're just idiots. They don't understand the reality, and they don't care. Kind of sad, isn't it?
I can't swallow that.
You just don't like it, which is entirely irrelevant. Facts are facts. Whether you like the facts or not means absolutely nothing. This is why people like Cliff are such idiot children. They think that their opinions matter to reality. And they are just wrong.
There's got to be an intelligent mind behind it all.
Because you want there to be. What you want is entirely irrelevant. Reality is what it is, not what you want it to be. It's not what makes you comfortable and happy. This is why I spend so much time rolling my eyes at people like Cliff, and this is why people really need to stop being nice to these morons. Point and laugh. Attack his overactive ego. Do something. Don't just let him blather on as if he means anything, because he doesn't. None of them do. A lot of apologists pull this, and we need to stop playing along. Stop being an idiot, Cliff. You mean absolutely nothing to anybody but yourself. You've got an absurdly overactive ego, and you are a complete imbecile. Stop acting like you matter. You don't. You're just a laughable joke.
And that's why the psalmist puts it to poetry when he writes, "The heavens declare the glory of God."
You notice that he's just cherry-picking his videos so it looks like anybody is taking him seriously, right? I've seen plenty of these street preachers, and that is never how it actually goes in reality. Most people who are there are just laughing. There are lots of videos on YouTube with college campus preachers, things like that, getting made fun of to their faces. Heck, the apologists will even capitalize on it so they can play the victim. That's the reality of what's actually going on. That he could grab one person who, for all we know, works for Cliff, looking like she's at all interested in anything he's saying, means absolutely nothing. This whole thing is a scam presented to the already faithful so that they will give him money. I hope nobody's surprised.
The skies proclaim the works of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge.
There is no knowledge on display here at all. This is all just, well, it seems to me, which means nothing. This is just Cliff making a fool of himself. This is why I don't do a whole lot of Cliff Connectal, because this is about the limit of his intellectual prowess. He just really wants it to be true, which doesn't mean that it is. It just means that he's an idiot. And once again, this is why I don't do direct debates, because it's far too easy for them to grandstand like this and try to run around with the goalposts. I would be stopping him every couple of words, just like I'm doing here, because that's what he deserves. That's what it takes to get at all of his misconceptions and lies. Back up any of this crap that you're saying with more than your fifis in faith, because I don't think you can. But hey, I'd be willing to take a shot at it, even though I think it's a complete waste of time.
Look at the complexity of the cosmos.
Look at the trees! Yeah, what an idiot.
It drives you to worship the Creator.
And he ends in the middle of a word. Seriously, how can these people be this incompetent? That's a point that I've made many, many times before, and they never get any better, do they? How hard is it to just wait another half a second? I don't know how these people can be this dumb. I really don't. I don't understand, but They all seem to be, don't they? This is really why people like Cliff Knechtel don't impress me, not like any of them really do, because they're running on pure fifis and faith and zero actual information, zero actual demonstrable data, zero evidence. They haven't got any clue what's actually going on, and they don't care. So long as it sounds good to them, it's got to be true, and that is patently idiotic. These people are all idiotic. They're too busy stroking their own egos and playing make-believe that they just don't care about the actual truth, because to them, actual truth doesn't matter. Only their own feelings do. Well, fuck these people. Let's stop being nice. We need to embarrass the cockroaches back into the darkness where they belong. Show up and consistently prove that they are wrong. Ask them all the hard questions that they don't have answers to. Put them on the defensive. Make them look as dumb as they actually are. That's going to get their intended audience, the ones who pay for them to do all this crap, to start asking a lot of the questions that people like Cliff don't want asked. Why? Because it makes them look bad. Well, they are bad, but we need reality in this conversation, not feelings, not faith, actual facts. Don't give up until they are driven off the stage in shame. Do it everywhere that these idiots poke up their heads. Stop letting them play their silly little games. It's honestly not that hard. Who's with me? The religious are desperately looking for any way to make it look like atheists are on their side in any way, shape, or form. This is just one more example. I think it's just sad that any ostensibly intelligent, rational atheist can't see through this, but apparently some can't. Don't be like these people. Those people are morons. Here's a short video by Christian Philosophy Academy that presents one of the dumbest and easiest to debunk claims from Christianity, and one that far too many people fall for because far too many people are really, really dumb. This is what happens when you get so attached to your beliefs emotionally that you completely lose track of all the mindless assumptions that you're making. It makes you look like a moron, because that's what these people are.
Christian apologist Sean McDowell recently asked his Twitter followers the following question. If you are an atheist or agnostic, is there anything about the world that gives you pause and makes you wonder if there is a God? If so, what is it?
And the answer for me is no. I have seen nothing at all that would make me remotely wonder if there are any gods. Not just the Christian version, any of them, which is really all that Sean really cares about. The Christian version. Well, fuck you, Sean. We don't care about you. The world is perfectly explainable without resorting to, God done it. There is zero evidence for any gods whatsoever. It's all wishful thinking and delusion, and that is simply not impressive. So, no, Sean, and I know this isn't Sean's video, but no to any theist wondering, I don't think there's any good reason whatsoever to think that any gods are real, or to even posit such a position. This also goes for, well, what's the best argument for a god? That we get a lot from the religious. And my answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. I'm not going to give you a best, since all of them are laughably terrible. The religious don't tend to like that answer very much, but there you go. So let's get back to the video and see what impresses atheists, or what Sean claims impresses atheists, because I bet it sure wouldn't impress me.
A common response was fine-tuning. Well, what is the fine-tuning argument?
We've done the fine-tuning argument to death around here, but hey, might as well do it again, right? I really don't get people who are so dumb as to fall for fine-tuning. Now, I'll let him get into it before I explain, but it's honestly a really, really stupid argument, only believed by people desperate to get to their imaginary friend. It requires a whole lot of assumptions that are simply not justifiable, but a lot of people who go for this, they're just not that bright, are they? So go ahead, throw out your explanation, and we'll take it apart one more time. Won't that be fun?
1. If a fact that we observe stands in need of explanation, and hypothesis H provides a satisfactory explanation of E better than any alternative explanation available, then E provides significant evidential support for H.
Actually, that's bullshit. This is just setting up for a gish gallop. This isn't even the fine-tuning argument. It's just a claim, an empty claim. So let's take it apart. Just because you want an explanation, that doesn't mean that you actually have one. This is the kind of crap that the religious pull all the time. But I just want to know. No, you don't. You just want to believe. You want to reach a point where you are emotionally comforted by the crap in your head. You just want it to be a god. But that doesn't make it a god. That doesn't make any of it true. I guess you can provisionally accept the best of the currently available explanations, so long as it explains all the evidence and doesn't take any gigantic leaps in logic, which is pretty much all the religious arguments and where they all go wrong. And I'm hoping that he gets there instead of this, but I just want to understand garbage, where he clearly, obviously, doesn't. But I guess we'll just have to see, won't we? Maybe we won't have to do the fine-tuning argument after all. I'd like that. How about you?
2. That our universe is hospitable to life stands in need of explanation.
And there's the false assumption that the fine-tuning argument requires. That everything we see today, everything around us, it was all somehow planned from the start. That we're so special that we could not have not come about. This is ego, nothing more. That life happened to come about says nothing about how things were supposed to be, because there is no supposed to be. Life evolves to fit the ecological niche in which it exists. If that niche is not conducive to life, then life doesn't evolve. Just because you're really attached to life doesn't mean anything. If the universe hadn't been conducive to life, then nobody would be here to talk about it, because life wouldn't exist. Life, or anything really, exists as a consequence of what is here. Not what you want to be here, what is actually here. What is here doesn't exist to give rise to life. The religious are really attached to the idea of humans. Therefore, according to them, humans couldn't not exist. Therefore God. But that is not how any of this works. It's just not.
3. That God adjusted the constants in order to allow for life to develop provides a satisfactory explanation for why our universe is life permitting.
It does absolutely nothing of the sort, because you just yanked that straight out of your ass. I can say the exact same thing about invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. That doesn't make it true. There are so many fallacies going on here that it's hard to know where to begin. This is an argument from ignorance, which describes every single religious argument under the sun. I don't know, therefore God. Doesn't mean that God done it. It means you're an idiot. There's also an argument from personal incredulity. They don't like anything outside of their God explanation, or they don't understand it, or it doesn't make them feel good. Therefore, God is the only reasonable explanation they've got. But that's not how that works either. This just assumes that God done it, or exists at all, something for which they have absolutely no evidence. Like I said, I can invoke the pixies, and it means nothing different from what the theists are doing all the time. In fact, different groups of theists invoke different kinds of gods, and none of that means anything. So this is all just stupid. It's not an explanation, it's an excuse. And sadly, that's all these people have.
4. There's no comparably satisfying explanation of this fact available.
And if you notice, his wording betrays his bias. Satisfying doesn't mean true. Satisfying doesn't mean factually correct or evidentially supported, and it doesn't matter what sounds good to you. It matters only if it is correct, if it is a fact. Because facts are facts, and faith is not a fact. Faith is a delusion. It doesn't matter what you like. It doesn't matter what sounds good to you. It doesn't matter what's emotionally satisfying. It only matters what is actually defensibly true, and this simply isn't. I've had Christians get really emotional when I pointed out that their base assumption that humans are special and just had to be here is completely indefensible. They can't deal with that. Yet, it is that unwarranted assumption that really destroys the fine-tuning argument, isn't it? Take that away, and there is no apparent fine-tuning at all. We're just a product of the universe that actually exists. Had it been different, if it could have been different, then we wouldn't be here, would we? And they can't handle that. How sad for them.
5. Therefore, that our universe is life-permitting provides significant evidential support for theism.
It does nothing at all of the sort, any more than my claim that invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies done it proves that the pixies are real. This is all just assertion, no evidence. This is dumb people being dumb, and that's hardly a surprise. That anybody falls for it shows just how stupid people on the religious side are, and if any atheists actually take this seriously, and I kind of have a hard time thinking that any do, at least who have thought about it rationally, then I don't have any respect for them either. It's just assertion after assertion after assertion, all glued together with blind faith and wishful thinking. And that is not how you come to any rational conclusions. But the religious aren't remotely interested in any of that, are they? That's the problem, and why they never ever do well in rational discussions. If you go and look at the comments on this video, most people are laughing at this guy, but he doesn't care. He just really wants to believe. He's just smuggling his own theology in and pretending that somehow that makes it true. Most of them do that. All of them are wrong. You don't get to just assume that all the crap that you already believe for religious and emotional reasons is automatically true, so there. But what else can the religious do, right? They have no evidence, they just believe. And believing without evidence is positively stupid. You get this. Lunatics without a clue don't. Don't be like this. You have to be better, because these people are complete morons. The religious have no clue what proof is, or for that matter, evidence, do they? So they think that if they can just get to the place they really want to go, suddenly it proves that everything that they believe is true, and they are simply wrong. This is what happens far too often, and this is why we need to call them out on it every single time. Here comes a short by Megan Timmer, a huge name in stupid Christian YouTube, because she makes a lot of short-form, emotionally comforting content for idiots who just really want to believe. This time, she says that she has a story that proves Jesus in all caps, but it only proves what a complete dipshit she is. And that's not remotely a surprise. So let's go watch her make a complete fool of herself. Not that she cares, because her religious idiot audience just laps it up. It's really pretty sad.
You cannot tell me that Jesus isn't real after hearing this story of a boy who was dead for 20 minutes.
Whoo boy, I can see the stupid already. Now, here's the problem, and I'm just going to call it right now, 7 seconds into the video, because this is that insanely common. Even if absolutely everything she says is true, there was a boy who was dead for 20 minutes and I'm guessing came back to life or something like that. Even if that is true, that proves nothing at all about Jesus. Well, I guess unless Jesus showed up in the flesh and just magicked the kid back to life in some kind of demonstrable miracle, which I think we all know that's not what's going to happen. This is just another example of, well, I don't get it, therefore God. Or, I guess, Jesus in this case. That's not how logic works, and it's certainly not how evidence works. But then again, these people are morons, aren't they? They are not remotely concerned with reality. They just really want to believe. So, let's see if I was right, although I guess anybody could see that one coming a mile away. So go ahead, Megan. Show us just how dumb you are.
There was this boy, Zach Clements, who went for a run one day when all of a sudden he collapsed and had a cardiac arrest.
Now, this is a real story from about 8 years ago, something like that. Zach Clements, who was running for his gym class at Victory Life Academy in Brownwood, Texas, he collapsed and was supposedly without a pulse for 20 minutes, and when he came back, he said he saw Jesus. Yeah, that's nice. That doesn't mean that he actually did, though. One of the most common symptoms of oxygen starvation in the brain is hallucinations. So immediately, anything that he says about this time is pretty suspect, isn't it? Of course, the religious, they don't care about that. So long as it gets them where they want to go, they'll believe pretty much anything. They are not remotely interested in the truth. But even if Zach was telling the truth, even if he says he saw Jesus in the afterlife, I don't know, whatever it was, to the best of his ability to do so, so what? Just because he believes it, that doesn't make it factually correct. If someone says they saw aliens, does that mean that they saw aliens? Absolutely not. If a Hindu says they saw Brahma, do you think Megan is going to believe that they saw Brahma for a second? Of course not. It's just emotionally comforting for a dumbass like her, so she buys into it hook, line, and sinker. Because these people are just not that bright.
His mother said that when they got to the ambulance, Zach was completely blue. The paramedics were trying everything that they could to resuscitate him, but he was without a heartbeat for 20 minutes.
Now, that would be incredibly rare if that actually happened. In most cases, CPR has to be started within the first couple of minutes if you hope to survive. I don't know that she actually understands what's going on. We're going to give her the benefit of the doubt, but yeah, I don't think she has the slightest clue what she's talking about. For most people, by 9 minutes of no heartbeat, severe and permanent brain damage is likely. After 10 minutes with no pulmonary reaction, you're usually dead. Now, there are people who have survived for longer periods of time, but as I said, it's really incredibly rare. Howard Schnitzer went 96 minutes without a heartbeat in 2011, but that's not really a fair assessment because he had people performing CPR on him, just as I'm sure Zach did. And that's moving blood through your system, which means while you may not have a natural heartbeat, you still have a heartbeat of sorts. Your heart might not be beating on its own, but the blood is still moving through your system. So saying that he had no heartbeat is pretty disingenuous. In the case of Howard Schnitzer, he had constant CPR, 12 defibrillation shocks, antiarrhythmic drugs, and constant attention from a team from the Mayo Clinic who got flown in really quick before his heart started beating on his own again. So either Megan is an idiot and she has no idea how things work, or she's just lying. She's omitting details so it sounds better to her religious audience. Yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments because I know which one I think.
But then out of nowhere, he got a heartbeat. But that's not even the miracle.
That's not a miracle. That kind of thing happens every single day. It's the whole reason people were doing CPR, you dolt. Geez, the religious are really gullible, aren't they?
When Zach woke up, he said that he saw a man with long hair and a thick brown beard.
And you do know that the Victory Life Academy is a Christian school, right? You have to be a Christian to go there. In fact, on their website, it requires that all potential students, and I quote, be willing to support VLA's statement of faith and philosophy of Christian education as presented in the student handbook. So it's not really any surprise that somebody who's been indoctrinated into Christianity and is attending a highly religious school is going to default to the things that he's had shoved into his head since before the age of reason. In fact, I'd be surprised if he saw anything else. Hallucination and indoctrination. Those explain it all just fine.
This man came up to Zach, reached out his hand, grabbed Zach's hand, and said, "Everything is going to be all right."
Now, here's a question, and I haven't looked, but did Zach actually identify this supposed person as Jesus? Or is Megan just reading into it based on her own preconceptions? I haven't gone and looked. I haven't done any research because most of the news accounts I read were grasping for straws already, just like Megan is doing here. She is so desperate to get to her emotionally comforting beliefs that I figure she'll just make up anything. But that doesn't make any of it true, does it?
Zach said during that he also heard angels singing in the background.
And what do angels sound like exactly? And how would Zach know? That's a fair question, right? That's just an assertion on his part, but he has no demonstrable way to back any of this up. These are questions any skeptical person ought to be asking. But the religious never do they? They're just credulous idiots. They are desperate to believe it because they're running on pure fee-fees and faith. So, no, I don't buy it without some pretty convincing evidence, and sadly, they've got none.
And when Zach woke up, he was completely fine. If you know that that was none other than Jesus Christ, then I want you to go hit that subscribe button and follow for more.
No, you're an idiot. Granted, there are a ton of idiots out there. Even though there are a ton of downvotes on this short, they are positively dwarfed by the upvotes because religious people just really want to believe and they don't care if any of this crap is true. Now, we've done a couple of shorts that are nothing more than feel-good fables pushed by the religiously gullible because they really want to believe. None of this gets you anywhere intelligent because the religious who believe it, they're not. Intelligent, I mean. There is no good reason to believe any of this. We can explain every bit of it through science, but they couldn't care less, could they? That's why you get some people getting massive support, even though what they're saying is just painfully stupid. Nothing here was remotely rational, but Megan, she couldn't care less, could she? She isn't thinking about any of this at all. She's just feeling. The second that you see people this abjectly stupid, you know that religion is ridiculously abusive. It's completely broken her brain. If that makes anyone think Christianity is a good thing, I don't know what to tell you because this is utterly ridiculous. Let's do another car theist. You know the type, the ones who apparently live in a cardboard box somewhere, so they've got nowhere else to record, so they just sit in their car and spout religious gibberish because they want everyone to be just like they are. These people also tend to be laughably ignorant of everything, as if that's any real surprise. So let's do some more of that. Why the heck not? This one comes from a channel called Wi-Fi Gospel, and yeah, you're just going to have to see this one for yourself. Why are so many of these things going on in cars? Do these people not have homes? I guess at least they're not driving around most of the time, but still, you have to have a place that you can film that's not in your car. So, anyway, this guy seems to think that he's got evidence for God. I've got my doubts, but let's go see if any of this is impressive. Spoilers, it's not.
There's absolutely no evidence for God.
I'll agree with you there. What you see when people claim there is evidence for a bunch of empty claims, followed by, therefore God, isn't impressive to anyone. That is not evidence for God or anything else. It's just them taking an observation and then stapling on, God done it. But that doesn't make God real or show that God actually did anything. It's just an empty assertion, and that's pretty much how religion operates. The only way to get to God done it is to prove that God is real first. Not assume it, not assert it, not have faith in it, but prove it with evidence, and that's never ever ever what's going on. So far, so good though, I guess. What else do you got?
Usually when I hear atheists say this, they're saying that there's no empirical evidence for God.
Which is what you'd need. Anything that exists in or interacts with our universe would leave that kind of evidence behind. And I'm sorry, but none actually exists. At least none that I've ever seen. And if you think you've got some, feel free to present it and I will evaluate it like I would for anything else. That's why they keep pulling things like, look at the trees. That's not evidence for a God. That's only evidence that they're an idiot. Just because you can't imagine another source doesn't mean God done it. That's just you being stupid, not you presenting evidence, which is what you have to do. Evidence must be objective and demonstrable and lead directly to your asserted cause, not just, it makes sense to me. That's all the religious ever have. And that's why they always look stupid, because they are.
The problem with this is they're asking a non-scientific question and trying to get an answer from science.
Except we're not. The whole job of science is to evaluate reality in a realistic fashion. If you're saying that your God doesn't exist in or interact with reality, then, yeah, sure, who cares about your God? All of the claims that the religious make about their gods, though, they certainly place it in the realm of science. So why shouldn't we use the only tool that we actually have that could possibly address the question to evaluate it? Of course, the religious are just making stuff up to begin with, and when it turns out that they have no objective support, which is what you actually need, they just invent stuff out of whole cloth. They just yank shit out of their assholes, just like I'm sure this guy will do. So let's keep going. It looks like we've got quite a long way to go.
Laws of logic have zero empirical evidence. You cannot put the laws of logic in a test tube and test them.
Absolutely we can. Well, not a test tube necessarily, but the laws of logic are based on our own objective observations about reality. We have never seen anything that can be both A and not A at the same time and in the same way. If we ever did, then we'd have to throw out the laws of logic, or at least that one, and come up with something different that matches our observations. We didn't just sit down one day and just make this stuff up. It's based on actual evidence from the real world. It can't be that hard to understand, can it?
But you still believe in the laws of logic, right?
I don't believe in them. I accept them as the currently best supported position that we have evidence to support. These people apparently don't know how reality functions, which I suppose isn't really much of a surprise, is it? I don't have faith in the laws of logic. If I couldn't test them for myself, which I absolutely can, then I would reject them as unsupported and unsupportable. It's the verification that matters, not the claims made by believers. But when it comes to a God, that's all they've got. Claims, empty words backed up by nothing but their own wishful thinking. And how stupid is that?
You still think they're universally true and that you cannot break them.
All evidence that we currently have at hand suggests exactly that. It doesn't mean it's impossible. It only means that we haven't found an exception to the rule yet. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. We just have to wait and see. As I keep saying, all human knowledge is provisional. Nothing lasts forever necessarily. It works until it doesn't. Some things we haven't found an exception to, and therefore we still think that it's universally applicable. That could change tomorrow. Welcome to the real world. This is the kind of stuff that the religious just don't like, because they're looking for stuff that goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and always. That's not reality. That's not how anything ever works. But they can't get that through their heads because they're dumb.
In fact, if you were to try to deny the laws of logic, you wouldn't even be able to have a conversation.
I don't know about that. I could talk about Star Wars versus Star Trek all day long without the laws of logic ever coming up. I could do that with a lot of things. Logic doesn't even come into most conversations, especially on the internet. But I'm not denying the laws of logic exist, at least the conception that we've come up with, and they seemingly have application, at least provisionally. So why don't you get some evidence for God? Because I can certainly present tons of evidence for the laws of logic. I'm doing it right, you're simply not.
I make the same argument for God.
No, you don't. Because you are misunderstanding the laws of logic, just like you're misunderstanding God. Nobody in their right mind just has blind faith in the laws of logic or anything else like that. I didn't just wake up one day and say, well, the laws of logic are real. No faith required. None whatsoever. That is not how shit works. These are two entirely different things. I'm sure we're going to see that clearly coming up because this guy's not that bright.
Just because you can't put God in a test tube and test him does not mean he doesn't exist.
No, but it doesn't mean he does either. In order to have a rational belief in a thing, God or anything else, there has to be some demonstrable basis in fact supporting it. Where is yours for any God? Because as I said, I can do that easily for the laws of logic. Every case we ever look at shows non-contradiction. That's evidence right there. Now, do the same thing with your God. Good luck, because you're going to need it.
However, there are syllogisms and arguments that you can make for God that prove him to be real.
No, there aren't, and if you don't even know how to spell syllogism, then you got a problem. The thing is either real or it's not real, and he can't just argue things into existence without evidence. This is where he's going to have a ton of problems. They all do. God is like this, he wants this, he thinks this. Well, how the hell do you know any of that? Where is your evidence for any of that? Because it sure looks like something you're just making up, and you'd need to be able to demonstrate it with evidential support that it's anything else but an invention of your mind. And in fact, I'm having a discussion with somebody right now, a deist, who's making all the standard, but we can't have an infinite regress, and then pretending that means anything, when he can't prove what happened before Planck time. And he won't even acknowledge it because he just really wants it to be true. Faith is not a virtue, never has been and never will be. Faith is an embarrassment. It's what you do when you run out of rational options. Stop making a fool of yourself. It's just not a good look.
And since knowledge is just a justified true belief, we can have knowledge that God exists. We can know that he exists.
No, you can't, because you have no way whatsoever of justifying your belief. To do that, you'd need evidence, and you have none. Truth, that which is demonstrably in accordance with objective reality, that's what matters. So how do you demonstrate that your claims are actually true? Evidence, justifiable, that which can be demonstrated to be factually true. How do you demonstrate it? Evidence. You get absolutely nowhere without evidence. You can't get to a belief in any God without faith, and faith is an empty proposition. It's just wishful thinking, unsupported by anything intelligent. This is just nonsense through and through. But what the hell else is new?
In fact, the definition of evidence is simply the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief is true or valid.
Yes. Where is yours? Where are your facts? Because facts must be demonstrable. You can't just claim to have a fact. You have to be able to prove it. Information. You have to show that the information is valid, that it is actually true. How do you propose to do that without evidence? It's the support that you're missing, and that's what we keep pointing out. It doesn't matter how much you really wish it was true. It's only true when you can demonstrate that it's actually true. Your faith means nothing. Rent a clue.
Based on that definition, arguments and syllogisms are evidence.
No, they're not. At least he figured out how to spell syllogism this time, which I guess is an improvement. But come on. A syllogism is only worthwhile if it's both valid and sound, meaning the premises actually have to be true. And how do you show that they're true? With evidence. The conclusion must proceed directly from the demonstrably true premises. How do you do that? With evidence. The problem is, the religious have none of that. They have pie-in-the-sky stupidity with "therefore God" slapped on the end of it, and none of it is demonstrably true. It's just assertion, and assertion without support is not evidence. It's stupidity. Stop making yourself look stupid. It's not a good look.
Evidence does not have to be purely empirical. In fact, if you make the argument that evidence has to be purely empirical, you have to provide empirical evidence for that argument.
But nobody is saying that. We're not saying empirical, we're saying objectively verifiable. And that's something they just don't have. It's why they play these stupid word games, because they have nothing else. Their claims remain unsupported, and they are trying desperately to get around that. And it's not working. It's why they wind up looking so dumb. It's why they really don't want to talk to us most of the time, because they know we're going to point their failures out. Not that these people care, because they're not after truth. They're only after emotional comfort. Seriously, maybe try growing up for once. That would sure be nice, wouldn't it?
Where is it? It doesn't exist. So stop trying to force every answer in the universe to be backed up by empirical evidence.
And since nobody's trying to do that, what's your point? This is another video that ends in the middle of a word, and I really wish they'd stop doing that, but honestly, what do you expect? This is just another theist with no clue what the hell they're doing, living in a fantasy land in their heads where the stuff that they're emotionally attached to just must be true because they really want it to be so there. So don't make him feel bad for not being able to back any of it up, because otherwise he'll be sad. Yeah, too fucking bad. Wah, cry me a goddamn river. This is how this always plays out though, right? If you want truth, capital T truth, that which is actually in accordance with objective reality, then you have to have some means to show that it's actually so. Not, I like it. Not, it makes sense to me. Not, but it makes me happy. Actual evidence that shows that your claims are justifiable and valid in demonstrable reality. And they don't have that. Not ever. Not even close. They just really want it to be true, but that is not enough. It's not enough that you believe it, you have to have enough to convince other people to believe it. And you don't have that. You can't even show why you believing it is a rational thing to do. And that's why they make so many excuses, because they hate the idea that they believe things for insufficient reasons. But they do. They always do. Because they're not after the actual truth, only their own childish emotional comfort. And that's the real problem. Not like they care, they just really want it to be true. But wanting it to be true will never be enough. I think we can agree that Christianity is dumb. All religions are, but rarely do we see examples just this clear. Yet, if you look beneath the thin veneer they present to the public, the whole thing really falls apart into a morass of irrational stupidity. It won't be a surprise what you're going to see today, because this is what they're all like. Here comes a video where the theist claims atheism is a failure, even though by every available metric, that simply isn't true. Not like they care or anything, because these people are idiots, and by the end, I think you're going to agree too. They assume that everyone that isn't just like they are, well, they just can't be happy or successful or anything good. Why? Because they're stuck in a lifelong childhood because they really just want it to be true. It's just not. So let's get to it.
There are many reasons why atheism has fallen on hard times.
When the hell did that happen? Because as of, about 10 seconds ago, atheism was still the fastest growing quasi-religious demographic in the world. All of the most successful countries in the world are secular, or mostly so. In fact, it's religion that has fallen on hard times, with churches going out of business left and right, hundreds of thousands of people flooding out of Christianity every single year, etc. What planet are you living on? Because it sure the hell isn't this one.
Let me give you 5. First, atheism struggles to objectively ground moral values and duties.
No, it doesn't, because that's not real. Yes, I know what he's doing, and it's really, really dumb, hence the name of his video, but I guess we'll just have to point this out once again. Atheism isn't failing. He's just upset because atheists don't buy into his theological bullshit like he does. He just assumes that his beliefs are factually correct, even though they are anything but. And therefore, because we're not just like he is, we're failing, even though we're not. There is no such thing as objective morality. It doesn't matter what you really wish there was, it just isn't real. We can't conceivably be failing to do something that's not real to begin with. This is just a failure of his own desperate need for confirmation. What the hell else is new?
Second, atheism fails to offer its adherents a sense of ultimate meaning and purpose in life.
Because there is none. Most atheists can handle that. It's kind of sad that you can't. But then again, that's really the problem, isn't it? He just really wants that stuff to be real, but it's not. And then, when we are doing just fine without all of his emotionally comforting nonsense, he claims that we're failing because we're not just like he is. No, we're better. We're smarter. We're more rational. We are better than you are. And that's not said out of ego or anything like that. It's just true. And it's sad that you're just so pathetic, isn't it? Because this is pretty much the problem with the majority of theists. They're just too dumb to realize just how dumb they are. They are desperately after something that's emotionally comforting, and when they can't find it, they get upset that everybody else around them doesn't need or want the same things that they do. Because what they want is irrational and non-existent. That's what makes these people so dumb.
Third, atheism as a worldview is unequipped to lead people to a morally transformed life.
Atheism isn't a worldview. Seriously, you people just can't possibly be this dumb, can you? Atheism is the answer to one and only one question. Do you believe in any gods? If the answer is no, you're an atheist. That's all there is to it. Yet the religious can't yank their heads out of their asses long enough to figure that out, can they? Why? Because they don't care. I don't need a transformed life, whatever the hell that means. I'm doing just fine. I don't need anything else. So, short story, kind of off topic, but short story. This morning I took our new kitten Jinx to the vet for her first round of shots and deworming, stuff like that, just to have her checked out, and she's doing just fine. While I was there and just sitting in a room full of sick pets with their people, the majority of the people were just arguing with the receptionists over their bills, no matter how small they were. Meanwhile, I just paid it. Now, granted, it wasn't a lot given what we were there for, but a year and a half ago, when my newest dog needed emergency surgery to fix some problems before they killed her, I just paid that too. The vet came in and said, well, it's going to be $1,000 plus blah, 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 blah. And do you want to have some time to talk about it? No, just do the damn thing. I will pay whatever the hell it costs because I have the money. And that's the way it goes. It costs what it costs, and I've got plenty of money to handle it. Then I came home from the vet today, and I waited for the plumber to show up with our new tankless water heater because our old one kind of died. It's been leaking into a bucket for about the last week, and we're probably spending a bunch of money paying for that water too, but hey, it is what it is. He's out in the garage right now as I write this, finishing the installation. And that was about $3,000 or so. Whatever. That's why you have a job, or you should. That's why you actually live a financially responsible life. Stop whining about needing Jesus or whatever, because he's not going to pay for your water heater. I'm doing just fine without your stupid imaginary friends. In fact, I'm probably better off than you are. Try to explain that one if you would.
Think about it.
I have. Why the hell can't you do the same? Because you're only in this for the feels, never for the reals, and that's the problem. Maybe if you got your ass up out of the pew and got to work, you wouldn't have so many complaints all the time. Why didn't you think about that for a while? Because successful people don't spend their lives on their knees, but on their feet, getting the job done. You're just making yourself look like a bozo. Maybe you ought to knock that off.
How many testimonies have you heard from atheists saying, man, let me tell you how not believing in God has morally transformed my life?
Meanwhile, here I am, having never been arrested, never been to jail, never seen the inside of the back of a police car. Well, after being hauled away, because I actually have sat back there because I have friends who are cops, but I can't even remember the last time I got a speeding ticket. It's been so long. I think I'm doing just fine morally. Can you say the same? No, of course not, because the religious tend to have a lot of problems with breaking the law. That's why, according to FBI prison entry statistics, most people who go to prison for serious crimes are religious. Where I don't need your imaginary friend to remain moral, you sadly seem to. Why the hell is that? Now, I don't remember what this guy's name is, although he's been in a video or two over on the regular channel. If I remember right, and I might not, so don't quote me, but I think he was one of those idiots who said, well, I used to break the law all the time and God forgave me. Hell, I don't even need that forgiveness because I haven't done anything seriously wrong. Now, if he isn't that guy, if he's not the guy I'm thinking of, sorry, but we've seen that kind of story more times than we can count, right? Why do you need an imaginary man in the sky to be a decent person? Why can't you just do that on your own? And here's a good question. What the hell's wrong with you people? Why are you all so dumb?
Fourth, the naturalistic worldview that the universe popped into existence out of nothing seems absurdly far-fetched to those who oppose a naturalistic explanation for the universe.
First off, only morons like yourself say that something ever came from nothing. That's a theistic belief, not a non-religious one. Stop lying. I thought you were supposed to be moral after all. Secondly, I don't give a damn what you oppose. I care what you can demonstrate, and saying, well, I believe this other thing over there, so I find what you believe to be absurd, is laughably irrelevant. Nobody cares what you oppose. We care what is actually true in the real world, and you don't seem to be very interested in that, do you? You're only out there with your childish fifis and faith, and that's nothing to be proud of. Nothing at all.
Fifth, atheism fails to offer hope beyond the grave.
That's because, so far as we can tell, there is absolutely nothing beyond the grave. Your childish wishes and dreams are entirely irrelevant. Just because you don't want to die, that doesn't mean you're not going to. Please try to grow up. Because again, he's just trying to appeal to the wishes and dreams of other morons like himself because he really, really wants it to be true. Atheism isn't failing, like I said. In fact, it's doing better than ever. But he's only trying to pander to the morons on his side who potentially give him money and attention. Meanwhile, a lot of us are just laughing all the way to the bank. And that's why I don't pander to anyone, because I don't have to. I'm doing just fine. I appreciate the people who throw in a buck or two here or there. It's nice to feel appreciated, but it's not that I need the money to eat or anything, although I see that a lot on YouTube. Well, if you don't fund my Patreon, I'm going to starve. Nope, that's not me. I don't have to worry about that. Because if you notice, that tends to be the religious. Maybe instead of bowing down to your imaginary friend, maybe you just need to go get a job.
Fortunately, unlike the atheist, the Christian can ground morality, discover God's purpose, experience moral transformation, know that God created the universe, all while anticipating hope beyond the grave.
Well, that's the story anyhow. None of it is demonstrably true, which is kind of the problem, isn't it? Because unlike the religious, atheists tend to be able to deal with reality on reality's terms, something the religious seem to have a real problem doing. That's why they want to spend all of their time in this pathetic, magical happy land in their heads, whereas we're out here in reality dealing with the world as it actually is, the world that we actually live in, even if it isn't the perfect utopia we might wish we had. Because guess what? We don't need a utopia. That is not reality. We only care about the reality, whereas you are terrified of it. Talking to yourself and wishing there was a magical father figure in the sky watching over you. You should really try to grow up, because otherwise you kind of look like a moron, mostly because you are. So, that was utterly pathetic. Seriously, if anyone remembers what this dingleberry's name is, post it in the comments because it's kind of bugging me. There's nothing actually on the video, so I can't just go and look. It's right on the tip of my tongue, so please help me out if you can. Thanks. Anyway, this is just ridiculous, but then again, all of them do it, right? Some might not be this obvious, but they all really do. You don't believe all the things I believe, so you're sad and I'm superior. Yeah, but that's not remotely true, is it? In fact, by any measurable metric, I'd be willing to put atheists up against the religious wingnuts watching his channel, and I think we'd come out on top any day of the week. That's why they have to rely on fantasy, whereas we are actually dealing with reality. They can't just handle the world in which they actually live. They have to live in this bubble where they're more special than they actually are. because we're dealing with reality. We tend to be a lot more successful, whereas they tend not to be. And that's why religion tends to appeal to the downtrodden, the poor, the sick, the hungry, the people who can't do anything for themselves because, hey, what else do they have, right? That's why they have to invent these nonsensical beliefs in the first place, because they can't just compete with us on a realistic basis. It's like a kid saying, but Santa Claus loves me more, even though they don't get as many presents because Santa isn't real and they haven't matured into adults yet because, they're stupid. God is just Santa Claus for people who have reached the age of majority but have still failed to grow the hell up. And that's kind of sad, isn't it? That's why we laugh at these idiots, because they've earned it. The religious love to say they can convince atheists, but we all know they can't. They don't really even try. They don't even know what atheism is. When they say they can convince atheists, they're talking about the straw man versions in their own heads. They only want to convince each other that their beliefs are true, even though they're not. The rest, it's all just a scam. This video comes from Paul Anthoba, however you say it, and he thinks he knows how to convince atheists about God. Now, we know that he doesn't because none of them ever do. I haven't found a single theist of any stripe who even has a clue when it comes to atheism, and sadly, I don't think Paul will either. That doesn't mean I won't take his claims apart and show just how ridiculous they are, though, because that's kind of fun. So anyway, let's just get into it.
How do you convince an atheist that God exists?
Evidence. It's really that simple. Provide direct and demonstrable evidence that a specific entity, in this case a god, is real. Go ahead. Of course, they can't do that, and I think they know it. If they thought it was possible, we'd see them performing experiments and making observations, since all of that is required for any actual evidence. But they're not doing that, are they? There is no scientific institute for the investigation of gods. That is not a real thing. If you're going to say anything other than provide demonstrable evidence, which we all know he's not going to do, then no, you're not going to convince anyone of anything. At least not if they have a brain in their heads. But I'm willing to give them a chance, so let's watch and see.
Firstly, don't try to argue with them about God unless they ask you about your belief in God.
That's not bad advice. I mean, maybe if the religious would do that, then we'd never hear from them again, because I don't go out and hunt them down. If they come to me and make claims, I will respond to them. If they put their ideas out there in the public sphere, I will address them. Otherwise, I just ignore the religious entirely. Now, I know there are people out there who go looking for this crap, but I'm not one of them. I never have been. Way back in, must have been mid to late 90s now, I was one of the moderators over at the Downnet IRC channel Atheism, which at the time was the biggest, busiest channel on the largest IRC network out there. We would have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of users every single night. We would have lots of atheists who would purposely go to religious channels just to piss them off. And then they'd come back and say, we got banned, like it was a stupid badge of honor or something. These people were idiots, and anyone who does that today, they're still idiots. It's one thing to have legitimate questions and behave in a responsible manner. It's another just to be a troll. Fuck trolls. I've got better things to do than purposely go out and look for trouble, so I don't do that I don't think you should either. I figure that if everybody just minded their own business and stayed out of everybody else's way, unless there was a really good reason, we'd be a whole lot better off. So, I agree with the first part. What's next?
Secondly, you can show them God's love by simply loving them. You can pray for them for God to reveal himself to them.
And how's that working out for you? Because I have had tons of theists praying for me for years, and so far, no God. When is God going to get here? Because I'm really getting kind of tired of waiting. But this is the same kind of thing that the idiots at STR pull, because they know that the arguments that they equip their paying idiots with, they're not going to work. Therefore, they just claim that it's in God's hands. And when they inevitably fail, well, they shouldn't stop coming back and emptying their wallets into Greg Kugel's pockets, because they will fail, but according to them, God will provide. Unfortunately for them, God never provides anything to anyone, not demonstrably. This is all just wishful thinking. This isn't going to convince an atheist of anything, except that you're a frickin' idiot.
You can help them and support them in their time of need. God loves atheists and wants them to believe in him.
Then why doesn't he ever show up in some demonstrable way? Now, yes, you can help people in their time of need, and you should, but that doesn't prove a God exists. It only proves that you exist. You are not evidence for any God, no matter how much you'd really like to think otherwise. This becomes bald rationalization, where the theist, having absolutely nothing of substance to present, they just make believe that they are the evidence because they're right there. But that's not how this works, though, and I have laughed at enough theists who claim this kind of nonsense that they really ought to know that it doesn't work by now. Again, though, they are convinced that it's now in God's hands and God will provide. Someday, eventually, maybe, if you just have enough faith. But it hasn't worked yet, has it? And I'm kind of doubtful that it ever will.
Type amen if you believe God can change an atheist and subscribe.
Fuck you. Even though this started out reasonably well, it quickly went to shit. I'm not exactly surprised or anything because this is pretty standard stuff. This wasn't actually being made for atheists. Well, here's how to convince an atheist about God. And without consulting any actual atheists in the first place, he just makes a whole bunch of shit up and says, see, I was right. They don't care about what we think. We're just imaginary boogeymen in their heads. They don't care about convincing us of anything. They're only comforting their own side and not convincing anybody else of anything of substance. This is the kind of thing that we expect from people who just don't know anything. They have no clue about actual atheists because they are terrified of actual atheists. They just make up an image in their own heads about what they think that atheists are like, what they want atheists to be like, but we're just not. Well, it would convince us, and since everyone else is just like we are, then yeah. Except we're not like you are. We're better, we're smarter, we're more rational. We don't take things on faith. Unless the religious can figure that out, these videos are going to continue to fail because these things are just stupid. I'll be here to keep pointing it out, not that I think the religious will ever really care, because as I keep saying, this isn't about us, it's about them. This is about the religious desperately looking to confirm their own confirmation biases. They just want it to be true. And all they wind up doing is making a complete fool of themselves. And I really hope nobody is at all surprised. Is Christianity true? Well, if you ask apologists, they'll say yes, but they can't actually demonstrate that it is. That's kind of the problem. They're running on nothing but fifis and faith in a discussion that requires facts and verifiable evidence. And they never have any of that, do they? So, once more into the breach, my friends. Let's do this. This comes from a channel called Brother Maverick, although it's not really about him, it's just a snippet of a Frank Turek video, which is where we're going to spend almost all of our time. Frank is just Frank, and that's nothing to be proud of. So once again, let's take Frank apart and show why he's a complete imbecile. This is not how you reach rational conclusions. This is actually how you just make a fool of yourself. So, onward!
There has not been a non-believer, up to and including Christopher Hitchens, who could ever defeat this man in a debate, and you're about to see why. Check this out.
Yeah, not so much. He's talking about Frank Turek, and I only know that because that's who he showed in the preview, and I can't imagine anyone more easily defeatable than Frank. Granted, if you asked Frank, he'd win every exchange because, Frank is an idiot. Most of them are. These are people with egos who can never admit that they're wrong, but their arguments depend on people already accepting the validity of their blind faith. And for anyone who doesn't, who expects people like Frank to be able to back up their thoughts intelligently and to provide evidence for things, they're going to run into a lot of problems, aren't they? Because that's another question to ask when these things come up. According to who? Who says Frank wins? Frank? His followers? I mean, that's a perfectly legitimate question to ask for anyone making similar claims. How are they objectively determining victory? Or are they just playing cheerleader because you like what they're saying? So anyway, let's get back to the video and see how this plays out.
Now, I have to ask you this. Why would the Jewish writers of the New Testament, all were Jewish with the exception of Luke?
How do you know that, Frank? Because we already know that the people who wrote the Gospels were not the disciples. The Gospels were written anonymously. This is an article of faith, not fact. Besides, all the Gospels were originally written in Greek. Why would ignorant Jewish fishermen and the like speak a language that was mostly foreign to where they lived? Better yet, for people who were almost certainly illiterate, how the hell did they write anything down? These are the questions that we need to be asking, and someone like Frank, he won't have any intelligent answers. He's all assertion and no evidence whatsoever. He comes to the table with nothing but faith, and faith isn't at all impressive.
Why would they invent a resurrected Jesus?
You are making a whole lot of assumptions that are not supported by the evidence that we have at hand. First off, as I already said, the Gospels weren't written by the disciples. That's all church tradition. That's not demonstrated fact. From what we can surmise, they were written down decades after the fact by people who were not eyewitnesses, who were just taking stories that had circulated word of mouth for many years, and each of the writers put their own individual personal spin on it because that's the message that they wanted to have. Did they make it up out of whole cloth? Probably not. Did they take pre-existing stories and redact them as they liked to come up with a new slanted narrative? Clearly, that's exactly what happened. This is what the vast majority of New Testament scholars, including Christian ones, have concluded. This is why we have to call out the apologists on their nonsense, because they are just assuming that their beliefs are true, without being able to back it up in any way. Well, how do you know that? Ought to be on your lips a lot, because they will have absolutely no answers. And that's kind of a problem, wouldn't you say?
Why would they say that a man who claimed to be God rose from the dead if it didn't happen?
I don't know. Why would Joseph Smith say that the angel Moroni gave him a golden book if it didn't happen? Why would other people agree with him and say they saw it too? Because people are delusional and egotistical, and a lot of them want to make money. That's why. Because it's a whole lot easier just wandering around and talking to people about nonsense and having all your living expenses covered than it is having to go out and fish all day or whatever the actual authors were doing. This is something that I see from the religious all the time, and I'm sure that you do too. They blindly assume that everything it says in the Bible, or whatever holy book they happen to follow, is automatically true, no questions asked. It's true because they want it to be true, but that doesn't make it true. They are unwilling to take that big step backwards and start to question their most fundamental preconceptions because they don't want to. It's faith first, facts never. Sorry, but that's not how rational people operate. It's just not.
They thought that would be blasphemy for a man to claim to be God. And why would they invent a resurrected Jesus? They already thought they were God's chosen people. They had no motive to invent a resurrected Jesus.
Just like Joseph Smith had no motive to invent what he invented, or L. Ron Hubbard had no motive to make up Scientology. Except, as we all know, they did. They were con men, grifters who were trying to skate by on the backs of the religiously gullible. Now, we know nothing about the people who wrote the Gospels. We have no way of knowing who any of them were, what they were like, any details at all. We can't pretend to know their motives, but for Frank to say that they could not have any ulterior motives at all other than Jesus really came back from the dead, that's really stupid. We can see plenty of examples of people who did the same thing for other reasons, yet Frank is unwilling to consider the possibility for his own. This is a Frank problem, and to be fair, most other theists have it too.
And certainly they could not have invented it in Jerusalem.
Why not? Because we already know that there were other apocalyptic cults that existed in Jerusalem at that time. Some of them are recorded in the Bible, some we have external evidence of, but clearly people were just inventing things in Jerusalem at the time without much trouble. This is just, Frank really doesn't want to believe it. That's kind of his shtick after all. He believes what he believes, and he states it confidently, even though he has nothing at all to back it up. The things that he doesn't like, he rejects out of hand without considering it intelligently. This is just Frank stating his opinions for a buck. Why in the world would anybody be impressed by that?
Where an empty tomb existed.
And where's your evidence for that? You have none. In fact, how would you ever even have evidence for that? Even if you had an empty tomb, which you don't, you have no means whatsoever to show that Jesus was ever in it. This is just, my book says a thing and I really like that thing, so it's just gotta be true. Frank, you're an idiot. You really are.
In other words, ladies and gentlemen, the New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers. There would be no New Testament if it wasn't for the resurrection.
Says you. That's based on a whole lot of empty claims and wishful thinking and absolutely no evidence to back any of it up. This is religion. In fact, I had someone on my channel post recently criticizing my take on something that William Lane Craig said, and I pointed out that everything he's doing, in fact, everything that all of the apologists are doing, is just desperately trying to get back to something they already believe on faith. They start with the faith, and then they work backwards, looking for any means that they can find to return to their faith. And I've been saying that for years. However, you don't just get to truth by constantly running home to mama. You have to actually care if the things in your head are factually correct and evidentially supportable, and people like Frank just don't. They just assume that they're right. They just assert that they're right. But that doesn't make them right. This is why we can't take their empty claims seriously. We have to go out and put them to the test, and for people like Frank, they fail every single time. How do you know that? Where is your rational justification? Where is your evidence? They don't have any. And the sad part is, they just don't care either. religion child abuse? It certainly can be, but I think more often than not, it's just an abrogation of your parental responsibilities. You're not supposed to be making a clone of yourself. You're supposed to be raising a productive member of society. And the religious have a real problem doing that, don't they? So let's go look at a specific example. This comes from a tiny church channel with only a couple hundred subscribers, and after watching this video, I can kind of understand why. This is a guy who wants to whine because Richard Dawkins hurt his precious widow Fifi's. I think he expects Dawkins to be a Christian when he's absolutely not. Well, I mean, maybe culturally, that's Dawkins' words, not mine, but otherwise, nobody has to respect your absurd beliefs because you really wish they would. So let's go see what this is all about and probably roll our eyes a lot.
Professor Richard Dawkins, author of The God Delusion, an atheist advocate who thinks all religion is evil, has stated that he believes raising children in religion is equivalent to child abuse.
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, I was raised in religion and I wasn't abused. I can think of far more abusive things that have nothing at all to do with religion at all, so I consider this vitriolic, although not necessarily on Dawkins' part, since the religious are very good at taking things out of context and pure confirmation bias. They want to feel like they are constantly under attack, which certainly isn't true. There's a big difference between your person and your beliefs. You are not your beliefs. Get over yourself. I really wish these people could get that through their heads.
His exact quote is this: "What a child should be taught is that religion exists. That some people believe this and some people believe that. What a child should never be taught is that you are a Catholic or Muslim child. Therefore, this is what you believe."
And I agree with that entirely. There are limits to how much you get to program your kids. They are individuals with their own minds and their own desires, and you don't get to tell them, this is what you are and there's nothing you can do about it. This goes for the religious and non-religious alike, because I see a hell of a lot of this in some political, we won't go there. This is a problem that the religious seem to have, though, don't they? They don't want to live in a world where everyone isn't just like they are. And as I said, this probably doesn't just go for the religious. Lots of people have this problem. They get really uncomfortable if anyone is able to have, much less express, different ideas or hold different beliefs than they do. They have a real problem tolerating diversity of thought. Whereas I don't really care. So long as you have an intelligent reason to think a thing, you go right ahead. It makes for interesting conversations, if nothing else. I think Dawkins' problem here is with teaching kids what to think, not how to think, and I agree wholeheartedly. Of course, this video is made by a church whose existence depends on people believing the, right things and sitting in their pews and giving them money. So I think there's a profit motive going on here, don't you?
That is child abuse.
That's the end of Dawkins' quote, I guess. That's all he's got. I don't know if it's child abuse. I would just call it bad parenting. The problem is, these people desperately want to turn their kids into miniature versions of themselves. And I don't, never did any of that. My kids have their own minds. They have their own beliefs. We could only set them up on the path of success as best as we could, and the rest is up to them. Now they're out there living their own lives, and at least so far, so good. They're not calling home for money. They're not out there pregnant and homeless. They're not on drugs. My oldest daughter owns her own home at 27. Both have productive careers. They're both doing just fine. What more could you want for your kids? If you're expecting them to be a carbon copy of you, then you're the one with the problems. Just saying.
Psalm 8. From the lips of children and infants you have ordained praise, because of your enemies, to silence the foe and the avenger.
Nobody cares what your stupid book says. Now, granted, he's just trying to preach to the choir because what else can he do? He needs butts and seats and money and collection plates. Otherwise, he'd just have to go out and get a real job. Therefore, he's just pandering, and he has a vested interest in not understanding what Dawkins was trying to get at. Or at least what I'd be trying to get at in the same situation, since obviously I don't get to speak for anyone but myself. Trying to force your kids into doing what you want, that is just bad parenting. Trying to raise them to be self-sufficient and rational and able to evaluate ideas based on the evidence, that's really all you can do. Then it's all up to them, and the religious absolutely don't want that. They want everybody to be just like they are. Too bad.
Jesus actually quotes this passage after Palm Sunday, when the children are singing Hosanna to the Son of David, and the Pharisees tell him to make the kids stop.
Now, I don't care about your ridiculous book. Nobody should, but let's look at this intelligently. Do we think that those kids in the story actually knew what they were doing? Granted, we have no details. It might have all just been made up, but for little kids doing stuff in churches today, and I've seen my fair share of it over the years, I've done my fair share of it probably when I was young, but those kids, do you think they understood or consented to what they're doing? Or have they been programmed from birth to do what they're told and to do what the adults expect of them, whether they agree with it or not? A mindless display is still mindless. If you have no ability to consent or agree or even understand what you're being asked to do, if they have to ask you to do it in the first place, and let's be honest, nobody is asking, they are demanding, then what difference does any of it make? Why would anybody be impressed with that? Because I know I'm not. It's like those silly school recitals that little kids do, where they're forced by teachers to sing silly songs for the entertainment of the parents in the audience. It's just a power trip. They're supposed to be in school to learn stuff, not to be forced to be obedient puppets. But that's how religion is, isn't it? And I'm not sure why anybody should be surprised.
Children know what those Pharisees and what Richard Dawkins doesn't know. In fact, other atheist advocates have spoken out to Richard Dawkins and said that he's been too aggressive in his defense.
I don't think so. I mean, I don't care. Dawkins can say whatever the hell he wants to, and I pay him no mind. But I think that if you're trying to program your kids to dance on command, which, let's be honest, that's all this really is, then you are doing parenting wrong. That is child abuse. It's not a religious upbringing at all, since I didn't have that in my own religious upbringing, but I see far too many who are just trying to make their kids into little God-fearing slaves, and that's really sad. They are their own people, whether you like it or not. Your responsibility is to impart good life advice and see to it that they become productive members of society. What they do from there is completely on their own. Your job is not to make them little carbon copies of you, because that is abusive, period.
Because Richard Dawkins has made himself a foe, an avenger, an enemy against religion and against God.
First off, at least try to say his name right. It just makes you look stupid when you can't. Dawkins isn't that hard. Secondly, Dawkins doesn't believe in any gods, so saying that he's an enemy of your imaginary friend is laughably absurd. Nobody cares about your stupid delusions besides you. Of course, he's not making this video for the non-believers, is he? He's not making it for Richard Dawkins. I'm sure Dawkins doesn't even know this stupid thing exists. He's making it for people who are likely to give him money and put food on his table. That's the whole point. It's why he's pandering and not trying to have an intelligent conversation. He's upset that someone might not believe what he believes, because if people don't believe what he believes, he doesn't benefit. And that sounds distinctly like a you problem to me.
He's blinded to the truth. That God saves us. That God rescues us. That Jesus has delivered us from all of the sins that we have done.
And there he goes into lunatic land. This is not going to be impressive to anyone but the already deluded. Granted, he's only making videos for the already deluded because he wants their money. It's sure not going to convince Richard Dawkins to change his mind, not that it's his intention to do so, because he doesn't care. I'm sure he didn't send an email to Richard Dawkins saying, "I made this video about you, go watch it." No, he's looking for sympathy from his own congregation. He couldn't care less about the truth. That's the problem. He's just parroting the things that he already believes without caring if any of it is actually true. And the rest of us who only care about the truth, we're just laughing behind his back. Hardly anybody watched this video, and it has virtually no support. It's got 0 comments, at least as I write this. And that shows just how little anybody gives a damn about his childish whining. Big surprise there.
And will come back to save us on the day that he returns. That is something that is worth teaching to kids, so that kids and infants would sing the praise of the one who delivers and rescues. Kids in our church, in our family, wherever we go.
I guess he just ran on there for a bit at the end. Not that it really added anything intelligent to his whining, since there was no intelligence here at all. This is why I am not remotely impressed with these preaching morons. They completely lack the capacity to step back from their pre-existing beliefs and actually think about whatever it is they're saying. Any idiot can parrot their faith into the void, which is really all he's doing. I don't care what you believe. I care what you can prove, and as we all know, he can't prove a damn thing. All he can do is beg for more money so he doesn't have to do anything productive with his life. And I'm sorry, but I'm not impressed with that, and nobody else should be either. This is just dumb. Why would anybody waste their time on this? What did he really hope to accomplish, other than making a fool of himself? And I'm sure that wasn't his expectation. That's just what happened in the end. Let me know down in the comments if you think that you know, because honestly, after watching this, I don't have a clue. Anyhow, thanks for being a supporter. I hope you're enjoying these extra videos, and you can let me know in the comments what you think of these too, because I get virtually 0 feedback here, so I just kind of have to guess. Well, the floor is yours. Let me have it. Lots of theists like to think that the debate is settled and they've won, but when we take apart their claims, they never work out so well, do they? The only thing that matters is truth, and that's the one thing that the religious never ever have. So here comes another example coming up next. Here's a video from Reverend Alex Meadows. No clue if he's a real reverend or if he's just being pompous, and I suppose it doesn't really matter. He claims that this video will settle the religious debate forever. And I'm willing to bet that he's just wrong. It's all going to be another theist making claims that just happen to make them feel good, because that's really all they're after. I haven't seen this all the way through yet, though, so let's go see if I'm right.
This video will settle the religion debate forever.
Yeah, I've heard that one before. The problem is, the debate, with the big air quotes, is often between two sides that are often just talking past each other. One side wants the truth, and the other side wants the fifis. You are not going to get anywhere like that. Of course, I'm willing to give Alex some time to back up his claim. This is less than a minute-long video after all. But hey, he does deserve a chance, doesn't he? So go right ahead, Alex. Settle the debate. I think this is going to be fun to watch.
Confucius founded Confucianism, and after he died, he was buried right here, and you can still find his bones there.
Well, that's the story at least. Because even if we did go and dig up the grave attributed to Confucius, that doesn't mean that the bones that we might find within it are actually his. Because there's no way to validate those traditions with science. We don't have the DNA of Confucius anywhere. Of course, I think it's obvious where we're going here. Well, we can't find the bones of Jesus anywhere. Yeah, but we can't find the bones of 99.99999% of humans who ever lived. That proves nothing. This is just an assertion, and assertions don't mean anything. So let's see if I'm right.
Buddha founded Buddhism, and here's where his remains are.
At least, that's the story. Again, no way to verify his bones are actually there because we have no samples of his DNA. Lots of religions claim to have the remains of their prophets, but that doesn't mean that they actually do, and if they don't make the claim, that doesn't matter either. The only thing that, well, we don't have Jesus' bones means is that early Christians were really stupid and lost them, if they ever existed at all. We don't know that Jesus ever existed at all. Even if he did live, it's more likely that he wound up in a mass grave and Christians just made up stories because they wanted an explanation. But that doesn't mean their made up stories are true.
Muhammad founded Islam, and this is where he's buried, and that's where you can find his bones.
Same goes here. We have no idea if they are the actual bones of Muhammad, and it honestly really doesn't matter one way or the other. That doesn't make Islam true. If we had no idea where Muhammad's bones supposedly were, that wouldn't make Islam true either. This is just getting silly, but honestly, what can you expect?
But here's what changed everything. Jesus founded Christianity, and he resurrected from the dead, and nobody's ever been able to find his body or remains.
That's the story that you like to tell yourself. Because here's the thing. Everything you said is blind faith. If there was an actual founder of Christianity, it's really Paul, not Jesus. Jesus did nothing of any demonstrable substance. It's all stories told in a book of mythology. And guess what? We've got no clue where Paul's bones are either. In fact, if you look at the founders of tons of religions, we don't have the slightest clue where their remains are. One of the founders of Jainism, Parshvanatha, we haven't the slightest idea where he went. Same with the final Dharma in Jainism, Mahavira. Same with Akhenaten, the founder of Atenism. We don't know where his body is. In fact, people have just been guessing what he might have been like based on his statues and monuments. We really have no clue about this guy. We can go on and on and on and on and find founders of religions whose remains have entirely vanished from demonstrable history, and it doesn't mean anything. So this is just a stupid claim. It doesn't end the discussion because most people think the empty claims of the religious are ludicrous to begin with. Big surprise there.
If you know Jesus is the way, truth, and the life, tap subscribe.
Yeah, no, I've got a lot better things to do with my life than waste my time on someone as dumb as you. I mean, honestly, how many discussions do you have with the religious that never rise above, but I like it? This is childish, it's dumb, yet this is the level to which the religious are capable, and that's pretty sad, isn't it? This was short and stupid like most things that I see, and I've been looking for many, many years for anyone who can rise above the whole faith in fifis nonsense, and none of them have managed it yet. None of them have even gotten close. None of them, as far as I've ever seen, are even trying. I wasn't really expecting anyone to do it this time, but I'm happy to give them a shot, and when they invariably fail, as Alex did, pathetically, it's yet another reason that I don't take any of this crap seriously. And you shouldn't either, although you should do your own work. Don't take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Do your own research and answer your own questions, because you're the only one who can make these decisions for yourself. Talk to these people and find out just how empty their beliefs actually are. Not that they care or anything, they just really want to believe.